me ask, I know a lot of the talk is about Islam fundamentalists. We've had major geopolitical conflicts over the past year. Let's start with Ukraine. Obviously, how has that impacted the political landscape in terms of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so I think Ukraine, especially coming right after the COVID pandemic, had the effect of uniting Europe, at least initially, right? I mean, we can talk about where the war is today and whether there's still the same sort of resolve on the part of Europe and the West in general to keep this war effort on the side of Ukraine going. But I think it's made the EU at least much more aware of its vulnerability and of the fact that it had to become more autonomous as an actor, right, when it came to the broader geopolitical, geoeconomic field. But it's also, I mean, that's where, again, you see the rift a little bit. And it's interesting, on the far right, you have a lot of Putin admirers, right? I mean, Orban is one. Fico in Slovakia is another, even though he's a social democrat, supposedly, but also with authoritarian leanings. But someone like Wilders is quite sympathetic to Putin, right? As was Matteo Salvini and even Giorgia Meloni. It's only in Italy, when they started campaigning and when it became clear they were going to form a government, they immediately switched tack on this, right? They became very pro-Ukraine war effort and skeptical of what Putin is trying to achieve. My sense is that's going to be the same story for Wilders, right? Is he's going to have to compromise if he wants to govern. The other parties will say, okay, you're not touching Ukraine, right? Or aid for Ukraine. That's a non-negotiable. Similarly with membership of the European Union.
Let me ask about the second conflict that comes to mind, which is the Israel-Hamas war. And you've certainly seen a lot of pro-Palestine protests here. I've certainly heard about them in Europe. Has that created more sympathy at all for the Muslim populations? We certainly hear about a rise in anti-Semitism, so I'm not clear what the picture is like.
The picture when it comes to Israel, Gaza, and Hamas is much more complicated. Right? First and foremost, you have Germany. Germany is a unique case, given its history, that they are very, at least officially, the government is very pro-Israel. Right? I mean, they are even going as far as to say that Muslims should openly call out, and openly every single Muslim should speak out against anti-Semitism, which, is going quite far. I mean, most Muslims are not constantly thinking about these sorts of things, right? Then there's France, where there's a very big Jewish population and a very big Muslim population, right? And where President Macron has to walk a very thin line of like, how much do you support Israel's right to defend itself versus the proportionality that this war then questions, right? So it's tricky because it seems like the left-wing parties that are in government and have to take an official line that is more balanced are struggling with their Muslim voters, right? And it's the left-wing parties that are in opposition that have a much easier time to criticize Israel's effort, right? It's different in Europe from the United States, I think. In general, is that the official line in Europe has always been much more pro-Palestinian, right? Or even-handed, whatever you want to say. But we've always seen the side of the Palestinians, and it's much better reported on and much better explained in Europe. So it makes for a very difficult conflict. And as you've seen, when it comes to Ukraine, it's been quite easy for Europe to remain united. When it came to Israel, Gaza, it's been hard from the beginning for Europe to speak with one voice. Do we continue giving aid to the Palestinians or not, was the question. What do we do to the West Bank but not Gaza? What about Hamas? Some countries did not want to recognize that Hamas was a terrorized group. Others then said, well, that's the EU official line. So it's much harder there. And again, it does worry me because it seems like it's inviting extremism on both sides, especially, again, as we saw in Paris last weekend,
right,
on the Muslim fundamentalist terrorist side.